Nandagopkumaraaya Govindaya Namo Namaha. We are reading today from Canto 1, Chapter 13, verse number 24. Agnir nisrishto dattascha Garudarascha dushita Ritam kshetram dhanam yesham Taddattairasubhi kiyat Agnir nisrishto dattascha Garudarascha dushitaha Vritam kshetram dhanam yesham Taddattairasubhi kiyat Agnir nisrishto dattascha Garudarascha dushitaha Hritam kshetram dhanam yesham Taddattairasubhi kiyat Agnir nisrishto dattascha Garudarascha dushitaha Hritam kshetram dhanam yesham Taddattairasubhi kiyat Agnir nisrishto dattascha Garudarascha dushitaha Hritam kshetram dhanam yesham Taddattairasubhi kiyat. Mataji. Okay, good. Agnir nisrishto dattascha Garudarascha dushitaha Hritam kshetram dhanam yesham Taddattairasubhi kiyat. Agnir nisrishto dattascha Garudarascha dushitaha Hritam kshetram dhanam yesham Taddattairasubhi kiyat. Agnir nisrishto dattascha Garudarascha dushitaha Hritam kshetram dhanam yesham Taddattairasubhi kiyat. What for meaning? Agnihi, fire. Nisrishtaha, set. Dattaha, given. Cha, and. Garaha, poison. Daraha, married wife. Cha, and. Dushitaha, insulted. Ratam, usurped. Kshetram, kingdom. Dhanam, wealth. Yesham, of those. Tat, there. Dattaihi, given by. Asubhihi, subsisting. Kiyat, is unnecessary. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation. There is no need to live a degraded life and subsist on the charity of those whom you tried to kill by arson and poisoning. You also insulted one of their wives and usurped their kingdom and wealth. Purport. The system of Varnashram religion sets aside a part of one's life completely for the purpose of self-realization and attainment of salvation in the human form of life. That is a routine division of life. But persons like Dhritarashtra, even at their very ripened age, want to stay home even in a degraded condition, of accepting charity from enemies. Vidur wanted to point this out and impressed upon him that it was better to die like his sons than accept such humiliating charity. 5,000 years ago, there was one Dhritarashtra, but at the present moment, there are Dhritarashtras in every home. Politicians, especially, do not retire from the political activities unless they are dragged by the cruel hand of death or killed by some opposing element. To stick to family life to the end of one's human life is the grossest type of degradation, and there is an absolute need for the Viduras to educate such Dhritarashtras, even at the present moment. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः. श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं. वन्दे अहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च. नम ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी नितिनामिने. नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे. नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नामिने गौरत्विषे नमः. हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते. तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये. वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः. जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद. हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. मूकं करोति वाचालं कुपंगुं लंघायते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरु दीनतारिणम्. Hare Krishna. So before we begin, I would like to seek blessings from all wonderful devotees here, so that whatever I speak is in parampara and is pleasing to you all, pleasing to their lordships. I have no qualification to speak here. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. So this verse today, Agnir Nisrushto Dattascha. So Agnir Nisrushto, what Vidur is telling Dhritarashtra, that you try to burn these Pandavas. We know the Lakshagraha incident where Dhritarashtra and his Duryodhan and others, right, tried to burn Pandavas alive. Dattascha Garo, that means that he also fed poison to Bhim. Darashcha Dushita also tried to pollute, insult the wives. Ratam Kshetram, usurped their kingdom, and Dhanam, wealth as well. Yesham, of the Pandavas. Of these Pandavas, Tad Dattai. So, Asubhi Kiyat, what is the use of such life, living like, which is given by them? So this is the very harsh statement being made by Vidur. So before we begin this verse, we'll just have some glorification of Srimad Bhagavatam. So we are seeing here how Vidur is trying to cut the knot of material attachment of whom? Dhritarashtra. And in Srimad Bhagavatam, there are so many verses that talk about cutting the knots of our material attachment. And I just thought that I'll speak one verse. In first canto, second chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, there are a series of verses that talk about a process of how our purification happens and how ultimately we may be able to get to the love of Supreme Lord. So one such verse is the 15th verse in second chapter of Canto 1. Yad anudhyasina yukta karmabandhi nibandhanam chindanti ko vidastasya ko na kuryat ratim. Yad anudhya. Anudhya means remembrance. Asina means sword. By taking the sword of remembrance of whom? Supreme Lord, of course. Karma granti nibandhanam chindanti. Kovida means intelligent. The intelligent person takes the sword of remembrance of Lord and cuts this knot of material attachment. So who will not want to listen? Kona kuryat katharathim. Who will not listen to Srimad Bhagavatam? Such is the glory of Srimad Bhagavatam. Now how do we get the remembrance of Supreme Lord all the time? How do we get this word? So one way to get this word is to always hear about Supreme Lord. That's how we can remember. And therefore the next verse comes. Sushusho Shraddadhanasya Vasudeva Katharuchi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punyatirtha Nishevanat. So we should serve Supreme Lord. We should serve the devotees of Supreme Lord, Mahat Sevaya, and hear from them submissively in order to get this remembrance of Supreme Lord all the time. And when we hear the devotees of Supreme Lord, what we develop is a taste for hearing the katha, the lila of Supreme Lord. And by that, and therefore the next verse comes, Shrunvatam Swakatha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanam. So when we hear this katha, Krishna katha, Lord who's sitting in our heart, Rudyantastohi Abhadrani Vidunoti Surutsatam. So he cleanses our heart, so, which is the most dreadful stage among all the stages of bhakti, from Adaushraddha, Sadhusang, Bhajana Kriya. It is the Anartha Nivritti, which is the most dreadful. And when we hear the katha of Supreme Lord, Lord Krishna sitting in our heart cleanses our heart. And then we are situated in a stage of Nishtha. And this is the prayer we chant every time we start Bhagavatam. Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. And Srila Prabhupada in his translation says, by regular attendance in classes of Bhagavatam. That's what he says. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtiki. Then we become fixed up in devotional service. So that's the glory of Srimad Bhagavatam. And today we are talking about Vidura's address to Dhritarashtra. So just as a background for this verse, when Vidur came back to Hastinapur in the palace, he was welcomed. And he was given such royal welcome and full of emotions. It was as if it is described that the life of all the residents of this palace of Hastinapur, it came back. So that's how wonderfully Vidura was welcomed. And everyone heard from him very submissively, with gratitude and respect. It is explained how much gratitude they all had for Vidur. And when we hear like that, right, that's when it affects positively our heart, and it changes our heart. So Vidur also reciprocated, and he kind of addressed Pandavas in a very comforting way, because he knew that Pandavas were already distressed. So since Pandavas were already distressed, he comforted them, and he did not even mention to them about the bad news from Dwarka, that Yadu dynasty, the collapse of the Yadu dynasty. He did not mention to them. But when it came to Dhritarashtra, he did not comfort him. He was already comfortable, too comfortable. So what did he do? He spoke very harsh. So from verses from 12 to 17, when he's addressing Pandavas, he's very comforting. But verses from 18 to 27, when he's addressing Dhritarashtra, it's exactly the opposite. But what is the intention of Vidur in either case? Intention of Vidur in either case is to elevate the consciousness of Pandavas as well as Dhritarashtra. So that's how we should also speak based on who the audience is, just in order to elevate the consciousness. Whatever is the right thing to do to elevate the consciousness. So Vidura actually had this intention of changing the disposition of heart of Dhritarashtra even before he came to the palace. And he had a systematic plan to attack Dhritarashtra's attachments, right? So he had a systematic detachment plan for Dhritarashtra. And he started with that. So he started with his body and how his body is physically incapacitated, how his body physically is invalid. Not just physically is invalid, his senses are also weakened. So there is no chance of getting more and more gratification through these senses also. So he started with body. Then he mentioned about his awkward mental condition, mental situation, how he's accepting all these things, staying with his enemies, accepting this daily bread from his enemies. And then he challenged his ego. In this verse, for example, he's saying, what is the use of such life when you are living on essentially things given by his enemies? And then finally he addressed his soul. He addressed the real distress of Dhritarashtra, how to get liberated, and he kind of guided him. So at body, mind, ego, and finally at the soul level, pretty much Vidura attacked Dhritarashtra and helped him. One may say that this is a violence. Is this a violence? This might be a verbal violence. If someone reads these verses, oh my God, what kind of violence is this? But this is not a violence, because Vidura's intention is to ultimately free him from all distress. And that's why it's not a violence. Actually, that's what definition of non-violence Srila Prabhupada gives in verses from 8 to 12 in 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So the main intention of Vidura was that Dhritarashtra should get the lesson. And that's what happened. So what is the link between 23rd verse and 24th verse? In 23rd verse, Vidura mentioned that just like a dog is fed, Gruha Palavat, just like a dog is fed by the master, you are being fed by Bhima. And now Dhritarashtra may argue, saying that, well, Bhima is not feeding me like a dog. He has so much love. He's feeding me lovingly. He's not feeding me like a dog. So that's when Vidur reminds him that, yes, Bhima may be feeding you very lovingly because of his good nature. He's Vaishnava and he is good. But can you expect such love and such care from Bhim or Pandavas in general? What all you have done to Pandavas? And therefore he's reminding Pandavas of all the things, atrocities that was done to them. And therefore he reminds all these incidents, burning in fire and poisoning and things like that, right? And in Bhagavad Gita also, the word comes atatai. Atatai means there are 5 ways, right? It is okay to kill an enemy if the enemy does one of these 5 things. And these are all the things that Dhritarashtra did. Now one may argue that Dhritarashtra did not do any of these things. It was Duryodhana who did it. But actually, if we really see, Dhritarashtra silently approved all these things. And silently approving something, that means that one also has to partake the punishment for it. So now Dhritarashtra is so old, but he has cultivated the material comfort, material desires all the time throughout his life. And for someone who has cultivated material desires throughout life, it is very difficult to take to spirituality, extremely difficult to take to spirituality. Because whatever desires we cultivate, they remain at the time of old age and at the time of death also, for that matter. So it is said, Angam palitam, Angam galitam, palitam mundam, dashana vihinam, jatam tundam, Vruddho yati gruhitva dandam, tadapina munchati ashapindam. Adi Shankaracharya has said that, and this slok describes Dhritarashtra's current situation. He's very old. Although it is not mentioned, his teeth have fallen, but I'm sure some effect of that would also be there. Vruddho yati gruhitva dandam. But still, tadapina munchati ashapindam, jivitasha, last shloka described about jivitasha. His desire to live and his desire to enjoy this material world still exists. It is not reduced. at all. So it is said that you cannot teach old dog new tricks. It is not possible to teach. So it's very difficult to actually take to spirituality in old age. If those who take to spirituality in old age, they have done some spiritual aspects in their young age also. Otherwise, it's very difficult. So I just heard one story. There was one brahmachari who joined the ashram, and of course his parents did not like it because they didn't want brahmachari to join the ashram. They wanted him to work and take care of them. So their parents approached the temple president saying that, why have you taken my son here? This is not the age to practice spirituality, right? Spirituality has to be practiced in old age. That's the argument that they gave. And temple president was thinking what to say now, right? And then he said, okay, if that is the case, you can take your son away, but you join the ashram because you're old now, right? And they could not answer that, and they said, okay, let it be then. they didn't want to join. It's very hard to take to spirituality, not very easy. So based on these 3 episodes, I was thinking that, of course, Srila Prabhupada's purport talks about Vanaprastha ashram, but there have been, in last 2-3 sessions, devotees have talked about Vanaprastha ashram. So I thought that we'll talk about 3 things based on this episode. So we'll talk about, we all have higher and lower nature. Dhritarashtra also has higher nature and lower nature. Okay? Dhritarashtra chose what? To nourish which nature? Dhritarashtra chose to nourish the lower nature. So, in fact, we also have higher nature and lower nature. So, we'll see how can we nourish, how should we nourish our higher nature and not nourish the lower nature based on this Dhritarashtra's episode. Second is, if Vidur was not there, Dhritarashtra would have definitely gone to hell. There is no doubt about it. So the importance of devotees association we'll talk about a little bit. And then a short life, but which is meaningful, is much better than a long life which is wasteful. Because Dhritarashtra's life is very long life, right? But there is no point in having such a long life which is wasteful. Even a short life which is meaningful is better. Okay, so let's talk about, so these are 3 points we'll try to discuss today quickly. So let's talk about higher nature and lower nature. So if you see Dhritarashtra's situation, Dhritarashtra was surrounded by who all? Dhritarashtra was surrounded by Mahajanas. Bhishma is a Mahajan. Vidur himself is a Mahajan. So he had proximity of Vidur, he had proximity of Bhishma. Vidur, of course, is Yamaraj. That's how he's Mahajan. But he chose whose association? He chose association of Karna, Shakuni, Duryodhan, Dushasan, and all these people. So that was his choice. And all these people, Duryodhan, systematically fed his lower nature. And always were training Dhritarashtra how it's good to do these atrocities against Pandavas and things like that. And Dhritarashtra allowed that to happen. So that is one of the things that we should all also, and this is for myself, worry about. Because we also have higher nature and lower nature. His Holiness Radharam Maharaj says everyone has 2 dogs, good dog and a bad dog. Good dog is what? Good dog is our spiritual nature, our love, compassion, all the qualities of spirit soul that we have. And our bad dog is what is our anarthas, Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moha, Mada, Matsar. And they are always dragging us down. And Maya in this world is always dragging us down, always trying to drag us down. So living in this world is like swimming against the tide or swimming against the flow of the river, because Maya is always dragging us down. Even if we have to be steady at one place, forget about moving forward. Even if we have to be at one place, what do? We have to still put efforts, because otherwise the forces are dragging us down. So it is said that in Satyayug, this divine and demoniac nature, which is also described in Bhagavad Gita, they existed on different planets. In Treta Yuga, they existed on different countries. In Dwapar Yuga, they existed in the same family. And in Kali Yuga, they exist in the same heart, same mind, actually. So, and that's why we are also affected by this. And this I'm speaking about myself, both divine and demoniac nature. When we are affected by mode of ignorance at that time, which dog is barking very loudly? It is the bad dog which is barking very loudly. When we are in mode of goodness, which dog is barking loudly? It is the good dog which is nourished and barking very, very loudly. And when we are in mode of passion, there is a big fight going on between bad dog and good dog. So which dog will become powerful? Depends on who we nourish. So obviously we want to nourish the good dog, right? The good nature of ours, the higher nature of ours. So how do we do that? So that's very important aspect. His Holiness Radha Maharaj says that we have to always engage ourselves in service. If we give our mind even a small space, if we keep our mind empty, right? It's said that empty mind is a devil's workshop. And it will definitely run devil's workshop, no doubt about it. So Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur also, he used to be totally against those devotees who would just want to go and chant the holy names at one place, like imitating Haridas Thakur. He would say that, don't do that. You serve first, and in that mood of service, you chant the holy names. That is much better than just chanting the holy names all the time. So even Prabhupada used to be very, very careful to make sure that his disciples don't fall into the lower nature. So one of the things is Prajalpa, for example. One of the things. And there is a Srila Prabhupada's pastime where Buddhimanta Prabhu, he came to Sydney from India. He was called so as to assist the book distribution there. And when he came, Upendra Prabhu started discussing with him, talking to him. And as they were discussing, Prabhupada overheard the conversation. And as Prabhupada overheard the conversation, Prabhupada realized that they were talking about other devotees. So he called Upendra Prabhu and said that, are you doing Prajalpa? And Prabhupada said, Prajalpa? No, I'm not doing. He's talking about other devotees Prajalpa? He said, yes, talking about other devotees is very much Prajalpa. So what should we do now? So he said that when two devotees meet, you should just take Srimad Bhagavatam and read about it and discuss about it. So Prabhupada was very, very careful in pointing out that we should not succumb to the lower nature very much. And Vaidhi Bhakti is the same, because Vaidhi Bhakti, we have to do Vaidhi Bhakti, all this sadhana bhakti, because there is this bad dog within us which is barking very loudly, and the bad dog doesn't want us to follow the rules and regulations. So therefore, we have to go against this bad barking dog, and we have to indulge in chanting holy names and all these things. So we are basically trying to feed good dog when we do sadhana bhakti. And when we feed good dog properly, what is the result of Vaidhi Bhakti? We develop Raganuga Bhakti eventually. So one of the most important things useful in feeding good dog is actually the association of devotees. And why we can see from the example of Bharat Maharaj also. Bharat Maharaj went to forest without association of devotees, and he succumbed to the lower nature. And somehow he fell down from even apparently advanced stage of bhakti. So what can pure devotees do for us? What can a devotee association do for us? Here is an example. Vidur. Vidur has come all the way to feed the good dog in Dhritarashtra. Throughout life, Dhritarashtra has fed the bad dog, the lower nature. And here is Vidur, who is trying to come and pull him up, feed the good nature. So there is another pastime of Gadadhar Das. Gadadhar Das was such a staunch devotee of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that he would go anywhere where preaching is very difficult. He will go and ask devotees and ask everybody to chant the holy names. So once he decided to go where? There was a Qazi. And Qazi was so much staunch enemy of these devotees that he didn't want chanting of holy names at all. Absolutely no chanting of holy names. And Gadadhar Das went to his home and started shouting, where is that Qazi who is against all the devotees all the time? He should chant the holy names. And then Qazi just heard some voices and all, and he went out. Who has come here? And seeing Qazi, Gadadhar Das started saying that, hey, you are always against chanting the holy names. You should chant the holy name of Lord. And Qazi was, first of all, astonished with his with his, what I should say, valor of Gadadhar Das. And he said, and he was surprised. But just looking at Gadadhar Das, looking at compassion of Gadadhar Das, he became very silent. And said that, okay, I will chant name of Hari tomorrow. Why tomorrow? You have already chanted the name of Hari. And he started dancing. And went away. So these are the devotees who come to feed the higher nature of ours. So we can see that process of bhakti begins by service to devotees. Just by the association of devotees, our process of bhakti begins. And this is an example, Vidur, that we see. Dhritarashtra's process of bhakti began when Vidur started addressing Dhritarashtra. Even Prabhupada used to tell his disciples that you had no qualification. I made your qualification. So it is the pure devotee's intervention in their life which starts the bhakti. So Prabhupada in one of the purports says that devotees of Lord are more merciful than the Lord himself. By the mercy of Lord. Of course, it's by the mercy of Lord himself. So when we do go for book distribution, our mood should be that. And then Lord will definitely bless us. So that is one thing. So our devotional service begins with association of devotees. Second, attachment to devotees is equal to attachment to Supreme Lord. How can we say that attachment to devotees is equal to the attachment to Supreme Lord? By the results. What is the result obtained when we get attached to the Supreme Lord? Go back to spiritual world, right? The same is the result obtained by when we attach to devotees. It said, Prasangam ajaram pasham atmanaha kavayo viduhu saeva sadhushu kruto mokshadwaram apavrutam. So whenever we get attached to the devotee of Lord, the doors of liberation become wide open. Exactly the same result as getting attached to the Supreme Lord. So in fact, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Mahaprakash Leela, when Haridas Thakur approached him and he wanted Haridas Thakur to ask for a benediction, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Haridas Thakur that because you are so much attached to me, anyone who is attached to you actually will get mercy of Krishna. So it is enough for any devotee to get attached to a pure devotee of Lord. That's it. And then after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took initiation in Gaya, at that time he came back to Srivas Thakur's home. And when he came into his home, he asked everybody to come. All servants of Srivas Thakur, everyone who was there in the house, he asked everyone to come. And he showed four-hand Vishnu form to all of them. Now, what was qualification of these others to see the four-hand Vishnu form? Their only qualification was that they were attached to Srivas Thakur. There is a pastime of a dog, right, who was following Shivanand Sen's group. And this dog got so much attached to Shivanand Sen, and Shivanand Sen was attached to the dog in spiritual way, right, that finally, when during the journey, the dog got lost somehow. And finally, when Shivanand Sen reached, the dog was with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave his mercy, and he actually went back home, back to Godhead. So, just because of his attachment to Shivanand Sen. So, we also see how all the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, how much they were attached to Srila Prabhupada, and they could do miracle because of that. So, what we can see is attachment. When we develop attachment to devotees of Lord, then we develop attachment to God himself. It's equal. There is no difference between the two. Third thing is, if we please devotees, we please Krishna. Of course, we sing every day, Yasya prasadat bhagavad prasado, Yasya aprasadat nagati kutopi. In the Aghasur's pastime, it is mentioned, I was also knowing that, I was amazed to hear that. How did Aghasur obtain personal liberation? Because all other asuras obtained what? Impersonal liberation. Most of the asuras, even Putna obtained personal liberation. But Aghasur obtained. Why did he obtain? What was his qualification to get personal liberation? So it seems, when Aghasur's body was almost like a playground for these gopas, right? And everyone kind of went inside his mouth, and everyone was very happy while entering his mouth. And Aghasur for a moment appreciated their happiness, and that was his qualification. That's what Acharya say. Just because he appreciated the happiness of these gopas playing there, right? He got personal liberation. So that much is the when we please devotees, even for a small moment, we can get this kind of benediction. Then fourth, by serving devotees, we get qualities of devotees. So Example of that is Narad Muni. As a small boy, he served these Bhakti Vedantas and he got the same taste for devotional service as Bhakti Vedantas. It is mentioned, the analogy is given that if we eat from the same plate as a TB patient, we will get TB, right? It's a negative analogy, but in the same way, when we associate more and serve these devotees, we also get same attachment that they have for the Supreme Lord. And the opposite is also true. If we serve non-devotees, what is going to happen? We are going to get attracted to material things. And that's what exactly happened with Dhritarashtra. He served whom? Duryodhan, Karna, Shakuni, all these people, and he got essentially exactly the opposite result, which is getting attached to material things. And finally, devotee is a true well-wisher, as we are seeing here in Vidur's case, how he's helping Dhritarashtra. His Holiness Radha Maharaj says that it is insane to think that we can be Krishna conscious without association of devotees. He says it's insane to think that. And in the same session, actually, Yaduvar Prabhu was speaking, so I heard him also. And he said he faced a lot of difficulties after Prabhupada left. Many disciples of Prabhupada faced difficulties. But just by association of senior devotees, now he feels much more rejuvenated. So just by association, devotees are our true well-wisher. Just through their association, we can make advancements. And in fact, there is a wonderful shloka in Srimad Bhagavatam, which says, the person, it is shloka number 23, chapter number 3 and canto number 2. I'll just read the translation. The person who has not at any time received the dust of the feet of Lord's pure devotee upon his head is certainly a dead body. Right? So someone who has not received the dust of lotus feet on their head is a dead body. That's what it says. So that's about devotee association. When we get devotee association in our life becomes meaningful. And even a short life, which is meaningful, is actually a lot better than a long but wasteful life. In fact, Srila Prabhupada, when he saw, actually once when he was walking early in the morning, 6:30 a.m., he saw a lot of devotees playing golf. Not devotees, I'm sorry. The old people, 80-year-old people playing golf. And he asked devotees, what are they doing? Prabhupada did not know that they were playing golf. So what are they doing? He said that they're putting this ball in the hole in the ground. And Prabhupada was so shocked to hear that, and he started crying and said that they are wasting their life like this. It's such valuable life. Only if they kind of spend their time in devotional service, what would happen? So Srimad Bhagavatam is very, very strong against this long life which is of no use. Srimad Bhagavatam, shloka number is one of the shlokas that says Taravah kim na jivanti bhastra kim na shvasanti uta na khadanti na mehanti kim grame pashuvo pare. Do the trees not live? Someone may say that I want very long life. There are some redwood trees in US. They have 5,000 years of life. 5,000 years they live. What is the use of such life? They don't do anything, really. Someone may say that trees don't have lungs. We have lungs to breathe. And say that there are bellows of this blacksmith. They also breathe. What is the use of such breathing? Someone may say that, well, they don't do procreation. They don't eat. We eat and we do procreation. But there are so many animals that do the same thing. What is the use of their life? So there is absolutely no use of such life, which is long. I heard this wonderful thing from one of my friends, that there is a research that is going on, that they are trying to prolong our life for 150 years. 150 years we should live, something like that, some research like that. And I was just trying to think what will happen if my life got extended to 150 years. First of all, how much of that will be my old age, which is full of disease, right? So when they are doing research to extend life to 150 years, I don't know whether they are also doing research to reduce the old age, which has not happened until now, right? So imagine 150 years, so many years of old age, full of diseases. And then what will I do for those 150 years, right? If I indulge in sense gratification for 150 years, what is going to happen is that I'm going to be indulged in more karmic activities, more sinful activities, and it's going to trouble me even more. I'll probably go to even deeper hellish planet than what I would have gone if I had lived only for 100 years. Isn't that true? So there is no point in prolonging life unless we have something meaningful to do in these 150 years or whatever they want to prolong to. So it's not easy to take to spiritual life, right? So someone, I mean, Adi Shankaracharya said that if someone says that I want to take to spiritual life in my childhood, so he says balas tavat krida sakta, but in childhood people are addicted to games, playing sports and things like that. In the young age, tarun stavat taruni sakta, they are attracted to the opposite sex. And at old age, vruddha stavat chinta magraha, they are always worried about some things. What? Because they are losing control over what they what all they are attached to, and therefore they are always worried. Parame Brahmani kopi na lagna. But nobody is bothered about spiritual life. So one of the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, he went to Srila Prabhupada and he said, Srila Prabhupada, the spiritual life is very difficult. Very difficult to follow the spiritual life. And Srila Prabhupada said, yes, spiritual life is difficult, but material life is impossible. So that's how Srila Prabhupada was. So one question comes, should we leave the body or should our body leave us? Isn't that true? Should we leave our body or should our body leave us? What do you think? So when we leave the body, it means that we have planned for it, right? And then we leave our body. When it's like going in a car, and when we reach the destination, we leave the car, right? But when our body leaves us, it's like the car throwing us away. I mean, not necessarily when the destination has come. Isn't that true? So we have to plan. I mean, when we go for a vacation, we plan where to live, what to eat, so many things we plan, right? But we never plan what's going to happen after our life. So Srila Prabhupada says in the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, chapter 13 and verse number 8, being disgusted with family life, one separates from the family by divorce or some other means. If one has to separate, why not separate willingly? Systematic separation is better than forced separation. And this systematic separation is possible only in one case. What is that? By taking to spirituality. So there are so many examples of short and meaningful life. Anybody can give example of short life, which is very meaningful? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, 48 years of age he lived, that's it. But in 48 years, he spread the Yuga Dharma throughout the world, pretty much. Ramanujacharya, very, very short life, actually. Shankaracharya, Adi Shankaracharya, only 32 years of life, and he spread the influence of Vedas throughout India. Then even Abhimanyu, for that matter, 16 years of age, when he was fighting, he thought that it's better to give life to a proper cause than living a longer life, right? And he gave his life. Jatayu had choice to live at that time. Sita Mata just told him that you just don't fight with Ravan, forget about fighting with Ravan. Just go and tell Ram that this is happening. Right? Lord Ram will take care of it. Jatayu said, no, what's the use of this life? I'll rather fight for the right cause and die. So we'll conclude here. Srila Prabhupada has given us a complete process for how to live a meaningful life. So whatever small life that we have, and life in Kali Yuga is actually small, very short life. But Srila Prabhupada, if we follow the process given by him, he has given us every way to make our life meaningful. We just have to accept it wholeheartedly. So what we discussed quickly today is we all have higher nature and lower nature, right? So good dog and a bad dog. Who should we nourish? We should nourish the higher nature that we have. Specifically, we should, the way to nourish higher nature for devotees is always be in stretched zone. So there are three types of zones, right? One is a comfort zone. If we are too much in comfort zone, Maya will pull us down. If we are too much in stress zone, right, then we will not be able to sustain, right? We are not at that level to sustain. But when we go in the stretch zone between comfort zone and stress zone, that's when we are always thinking about how to spread this Krishna consciousness everywhere. And that's what Srila Prabhupada says is a Madhyam Adhikari, right? Someone who is always thinking about how to spread Krishna consciousness. And one of the important ways of doing that is to get devotees association. We discussed about that, how the importance of devotee association. And then through that, if we live even a short life, even if our life is short, but if we live this meaningful life by following the principles of Srila Prabhupada, then it's much, much better than living a very long life without following these principles. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavat Mahapuran ki jai. Hare Krishna.